Hey guys, welcome back. My name is Scott Halverson, and today we are going to be talking about painting and what you need for painting. I have a list of things that I absolutely use almost every time I paint something in the minis or even assemble a model. So we're going to kind of cover all of that. And my must-haves in the store. We'll have the must-haves and then we should-haves, okay? And then the luxury items. So let's get right into it, and we're going to go over all of our items that we have to have. First and foremost, you will need some minis to paint. I chose to work on the Stormcast Eternals from Warhammer this time. And I'm not done. I've just started painting this guy. But you need a good mini, and with a good mini, you are going to need some tools to assemble said mini. And so we're going to get right into that. We will go over all the tools I think you need to assemble a mini. So setting the mini aside, we are moving on to the tools required to assemble the minis. First, you will need a good set of clippers. Some people get away with nail clippers or a little pair of scissors or a Stanley blade, which of course we're going to use, but I prefer to go ahead and I went out and I got me a set of Citadel clippers, which I've used a lot of different brands, and I've used RV Painter ones, I've used off-brand ones. These ones, by far, have been the nicest clippers. They're very thin, so they get right into the nice little details to cut the sprues. But I did find they were a little slippery, so I bought some Sprue, which is a silicone putty glue type stuff. But what you do is you mix it up, and then I put it on this, and I textured it, so it would be easier to grip, and now they don't go flying out of my hands. I haven't dropped them since I put that on there. So, yeah, so you need a pair of cutters. Now we're moving on. We will also need a Sprue Tool, which you can get away with just using an Exacto Blade again, but you're going to hurt yourself with that. So here, this is a dull. Like you can't really hurt yourself with this, as you see. But it's for moving along the sprue lines. I don't know if I don't have something right here in the front of me to do that with, but I'll take this mini back. If you can imagine sprue lines on the legs here, you could take this and you could take them and scrape them off really nicely. Well, you can kind of see right there. You can kind of see this right there. There's a sprue line. Yeah, but you're supposed to. You take this, you can just scrape off that sprue line, right? Awesome to make everything smooth and clean. I use it a lot. As you can tell, this is a very well-used tool. My hand is wearing off the aluminum coloring, the aluminum paint, or the paint that they used on the aluminum here. And these are all metal tools, by the way, that I'm using. So really handy. The other tool that is very, very super important is, of course, the Exacto Blade. Now that is for cleaning up some of the sprues, because you don't want to use the sprue remover tool. You don't want to use this thing to try and remove a chunk of sprue. And if your little cutters don't do it well, then you take your little scraper and you do it with that. Of course, this is sharp, so you got to be careful. Once again, I was having problems holding on to this thing, so I took some Sprue again, and now I have no problems holding on to it at all. So, then what are the tools that you use to... Oh, well, we need some assembly tools, right? Or the glues. I use testers. I've used Games Workshop, Tamio. I've used them all. I've had all of them at different points. This just happens to be what I could find without costing me an arm and a leg to get shipped to me, because someone had this locally, so I went and bought it. But it's a nice little... this is for the plastic glues. These are definitely for assembling models from like GW, right? Because it is a plastic model, which then you use plastic glues for the plastic models, because that essentially just melts the two pieces together and welds them. But I guess I can't break the tip open. Anyway, so what you can see here is I put a pin in the tip, but it's got a nice long tip there that I can use, and it's for getting small amounts on the model without making it a complete disaster. So yes, a very good plastic glue. Don't get knockoff plastic glues. Just go out and buy the brand name stuff. Like I said, Testers, Tamio makes some, Citadel makes some, Army Painter makes some. I found that Army Painter stuff is a little thick for my taste, but if you want a thick glue, Army Painter does that. You also are going to want a super glue. I use an extra super glue from Bob Smith Industries. This is literally what it is super glue, and it's for taking pretty much any two materials and sticking them together. I like to, sometimes you get some heavy items and the bases are made out of a different type of material than the plastic. So then you take and you have to use super glue, because if you use plastic glue on something that doesn't react like some kind of acrylic, nothing will stick to it. But super glue will stick to acrylic. So there you go. Moving on. Now you got your model assembled. What would you need to use? Well, I think the first thing we're going to do is start with paints. I love to use my speed paints. This is Army Painter has introduced these to us, and they are beautiful. I'm only showing you 3 colors, but I do have the other set. But I just want to show you Army Painter speed paints. Very quick, very easy to get some basic work done on pretty much any model. It's a good base layer paint. No, I shouldn't say it's a good base layer paint, but it is definitely a paint that can give you the results you want very quickly. I don't have any models in front of me right off the top of my head to show you, but yeah, it's a fantastic paint. We're not really talking about how cool models are. We're talking about the tools I use to do and paint cool models. Because if you've seen my videos, you've seen that I have a lot of shorts with a lot of painted minis. I do use stuff from Reaper, the Master Series paints. These are very nice. They got very nice colors. You don't have to really add any medium to them to make them liquidy. That you can put these in an airbrush. You can just mix them up a little bit and just put them on there. These, to me, these are have-to-have paints. Like the colors are vibrant. I have a lot of colors of them, and they're a very good paint. I also use Vallejo from the WizKids Vallejo line. I carry these in my store, so that's why I started using them. But I found that was the first time I used Vallejo, and I found that the colors are it's a very nice pigment. And it paints on very nice. There's very little, it's not thin, so sometimes you do have to add a little thinner, but you can paint something like this, even if it says it's just a color. You can take this and you can make it a base layer, because the pigment is not very opaque. It's not very translucent. You can't see through it, all right? So it's a very nice thick paint. It does need a little bit of, sometimes you need to use a little bit of a wet palette, which we'll get into here in a bit, to make this paint really nice. But for the most part, most of these little jars, they're tiny jars, unfortunately, compared to, as you can see, compared to this and even the Reaper paints. You're not getting a whole lot here. But these come in a little kit, so I found that, yeah, I love them. They're a very good detail paint for me, or a base paint, if I deciding I want to go with something different than what I can get with my speed paints. I did bump into another Vallejo type of called Game Color, Glorious Gold, but I do have other Game Colors. But this is just the one I happen to have laying around here in front of me. It's a Vallejo paint, but it's a much bigger bottle, as you can see. Much bigger. You get a lot more paint in this one, but very good paint. I like it. It's a smooth, crisp color. But what kind of painter would I be if I did not include Citadel Paints in my lineup? The best paint Citadel Paints make, in my opinion, is Lead Belcher. Retribution Armor is very good as far as the metallics go. These are 2 of the best metallics on the planet. I definitely, when you're painting Games Workshop stuff, using these paints for Games Workshop models makes them look just like they would out of a picture book, right? Also, there is a shade that I use called Airbrush. That is my go-to shade. If I don't know what I want to shade something in, Airbrush is the way to go. Moving along, though, we are kind of dilly-dallying here, but when I'm painting, not only do you have paints, you do need paint brushes, right? Oh, I do have other paints. Sorry. Let's get into some of this. We do have some big, giant base paints. These are the 8 fluid ounce from Apple Barrel. I like to use these when I'm doing scenery. I have a few of them. We got the browns. We got the blacks. We got the grays. Those are a nice base layer paint. Just because, like, who wants to use their $5 little or $7 little bottle of paint when you can go to Walmart and get apple barrel paints for that whole bottle was probably $3, right? And so that's cool. But I also I tried to skip, but we're not going to skip these. The style well, you can read it. These are easy surface primer. It's an acrylic surface primer, the water-based primer, and you can use it in airbrush. You can paint it on with a brush. This is from Badger Paint. I think it's the Badger Company, Badger Paint Company, and yeah, Badger Airbrush Paint Company. The best that I've used so far, primers. These are fairly decent bottles. I think it's like $30 for this little pack here, and it was a very good primer for your plastic models, for any models that I've used so far. I love them. Okay, so we got to move on now. We got to move on to the paint brushes. There are so many different brushes that I use. It's ridiculous, but I do have a few favorites that my go-tos. When I'm painting large quantities of stuff, I use the monster brush from Army Painter. Seems like I do have an affinity for Army Painter, but I do use quite a few Citadel paint brushes. I use some Chinese brushes. I use small one special brushes. I have all kinds of brushes, but it's all depending on the project. But for the most part, I get away with these 5 brushes I'm going to show you. The Army Painter Regiment brush, which is just a little bit smaller tip. I do leave the caps on all of them, but that's just a preference thing. I don't use these 2 as often because they're kind of a really pain in the butt. But you can see that this is called the Insane Detail, which is a very tiny. We'll see if we can't get down there and show you. You can kind of see what's going on there. And then, last but not least, the one I use the least amount, but it's still a have-to-have brush. I shouldn't say have-to-have. This is a definite luxury brush, is the Psycho. As you can see, the Psycho has a very small amount of paint, little hairs on there. My spoil brush, the one I use for most of my detail work, for most of my bulk getting in the details and edging and stuff, is the one that I got from Army Painter called the Kalinsky Masterclass paintbrush. This one, I just absolutely adore this paintbrush. It keeps that tip so nice. It's the Wargamer Kalinsky Master. I think it's about a $20 paintbrush. At least when I bought it, it was. It's an expensive paintbrush, but I tell you what, it's hard to beat how I've used this thing for years now, and you wouldn't even barely know that I've used it as long as I have. Let's see if we can't get that. I mean, there you go. Yeah, I mean, it's still good. So, anyway, we're going to put those away and we're going to move on. Because we got to get into brush care, because that's kind of important. When you're done painting, you have to take care of your brushes. I use a generic, well, it's not really generic, it's a Citadel wash pot. It holds the brushes in there nicely. Just water. Sometimes a little, I'll use a little bit of like some kind of cleaner. There's multiple types of cleaners. Murphy's oil soap I've used dish soap, I've used Simple Green. But most of the time it's just water until I'm done when I want to clean my brush, and then I go ahead and add other cleaners. But to top that off, I do have, when I'm done painting for the day, and I have nothing better to do with myself, I will go ahead and bring out the Master's Brush Cleaner and Preserver. What it does, it is quite an amazing little thing, and it takes forever to use. I've had this for a couple of years now. You get your paintbrush wet and you rub it in here, and you just kind of get a little bit of water on there, and you rub it in there, and it pulls the paint. Like there's whatever the substance is in here, basically coagulates to the paint and pulls it right off. Then you rinse it off in the water and you do it again until you stop getting a color. And it keeps your brushes just beautiful. I love it. If I have a really bad brush, it has to sit in like Murphy's oil soap water mixture for a few days. But this is my everyday cleaner stuff. I did skip a few things that are that I use a lot. I use my my holder, which is one I just 3D printed. I do have a Citadel one. I just can't seem to find it right now, or my daughter has it. Whichever, it's okay. But what is this? Is a 3D printed one. You can see here. Let's get back up here. As you can see here, you just hold this, and then when you're painting, you got some stability here for you. So it's pretty handy. It's very cheap to print. This is probably a 50-cent print, if that. Right? So we'll move on to the next thing. Something you don't have to have, but boy, oh boy, I tell you what, I love having. And now this is before any of the people have come out with these so-called hobby paint mixers, right? Which I don't know are any good. I've done no reviews on them, and maybe one day I will. But it's a Vortex Mixer from IntelliLab. Basically, it's not plugged in right now. But you take your little bottle of paint, you shove it onto here like so. You shove it onto here like so, or like so, however you want to do it. And that thing will vibrate, and it mixes your paint. It'll take paints that are terribly separated, and it'll turn them right back into what they were originally. It's an $80 toy, unfortunately. It's not really a toy. This is definitely a professional piece of equipment, but it mixes like nothing else. I've used this for many years. I bought one of these probably 4 or 5 years ago, and I've never regretted it. This thing has not let me down. You basically push on it, it vibrates, mixes your paint. What more could you ask for, right? Another tool you don't need to have, but you really should have, is a wet palette. Now, I use this. I put an arrow on here to tell me which way my paintbrushes were sitting in there. So if I set it down, I don't do this and say that paintbrush doesn't have a cap on it, doesn't squish it, right? That way I know which way my paintbrushes are supposed to be sitting in their thing. But the wet palette, what's the bonus of the wet palette? I will show you that. Give me a second to put these back. Underneath here, underneath the wet palette is a piece of like parchment paper, essentially. And I don't want to touch that paint because it's still moist. Let's see if we can get a picture of it. Yeah, you can still see it's wet. Underneath it, though, is a nice piece of foam that when it gets wet, keeps the moisture inside this. Here, let me see if we can get that. Yeah, there's a piece of foam right there. But what it does is when you put paint on this thing, it keeps the paint wet. I'll show you. See? It's wet. It's still wet. I would have to add a little bit more paint to keep that useful right now because it's been sitting there for a few days. But I tell you what, when you're just off and on painting like I do, I get a few hours here, hour there. You know, I don't get to paint constantly for day in and day out. It is very nice to have. It is a absolutely handy tool. It's a must-have for me now that I've switched to it. There's probably plenty of different brands out there that do this, but I happen to love the Army Painter stuff. Again, Army Painter seems to be doing really well in my book. The last but not least, let's see here. What else are we missing? Oh, here's a couple other things we're missing. I got an airbrush. This is for when you're putting on your, when I'm putting on my primer, I like to use my Posh Talon. It's a gravity feed airbrush. And you just spray it. And it's pretty simple. It's not something you need, but it is definitely, if you can afford it, you have to buy a little compressor to go with it. And then this little cleaning bin where you spray everything, all leftover residue in here. And it keeps kind of some of the stink down. But it's nice to have because when you need it, right? Once you use it, you're like, wow, how did I go for so long? Another brush I do like to keep on hand is makeup brushes. This is almost a brand new one. What would I use those for? Well, if you're going to be, say, dry brushing something big, for instance, and I wanted to make a metal look on it, I would use this, and it's a very. I seen a YouTuber. I don't remember the name right off the top. I think it was Black Magic Craft or one of the guys. Use a makeup brush to do a big piece of terrain. And they just, I mean, it's so nice because lots of the dry brushes you get are like this size or this size, right? Well, I tell you what, you're dry brushing a piece of terrain that's, 10, 12 inches across, and you're using this little tiny brush here, that sucks. But you use this boy, and you can get that. You get a lot of dry brushing out, and it's a very soft brush. So you can't just, you got to use it a little different. These bristles are fairly firm, on these two dry brushes. But on this one, it's fairly soft, but it's a really nice way to get some extra love and attention into your minis. What else? I think, well, I guess the other thing that's very optional, and I don't use it very often, is my heat gun. If I'm doing a piece that I need to kind of speed up the process a little bit, I do have a heat gun. Be fully aware, though, that this heat gun will melt your mini. Absolutely will just destroy it. It's something you don't need. I do have an hair dryer that I used to use, but the cord and stuff, it's just too bulky. This is a much smaller tool. It's pretty handy. No real specific brand name on this one, that heat tool, whatever. I think something I got off Amazon, but it does. You can run it across your mini, dry that paint up really quick. I think we're kind of coming to the end of what you need to have. I hope you got a good. I hope that was a good review of some of the products we use here at the store, or some of the products I use when I'm painting and assembling minis. I've painted and assembled probably thousands of minis by now. By no means am I master class or anything like that. I do love to do it, and I've enjoyed it. Of course, there's lots of little odds and end tools, but those are the ones that I always have at my desk for the most part, that are pretty much ready to be used anytime. Everything's within arm's reach of me. Just keep it simple. Keep it simple, stupid. The KISS method. I kind of live my life like that most of the time. And it is simple once you do it like that. I know this video's kind of run on. Like I said, I hope I kind of covered a lot of stuff that I kind of wanted to. I can go into detail more. I'll show you how to use the stuff like this stuff at some point in maybe a shorts video. Because, man, I tell you what, you can pick this up at your hobby stores. Well, I picked mine up at Hobby Lobby. So far, it's the only place I can find it in my area. But it's probably at Michael's, too. But it's such a nice... I'll make a video on that. I'll show a video of maybe doing some other stuff, like priming some stuff with the Badger primers. Painting on the 3D printed handles, maybe even getting a Citadel one in. And then just showing you what the different paints are like sometime. I know there's lots of videos on lots of this stuff, but I kind of wanted to show you what we do. There's a lot of shorts that I've made, some videos I've made on our minis that we painted here in the store. And I just want to show you what we have and what we're doing and how we're getting to that results. Like I said, the only real expensive two things that I have in here are, one of my paintbrushes is pretty expensive. That was the Masterclass one. My mixer, very expensive. You can shake them. You can do it like that in a mix. It's just more pain in the butt. The Airbrush is a little more expensive with the compressor, probably a couple $100 when you get a nice one. And the rest is pretty cheap. Like, nothing's expensive. The minis are expensive, especially if you're doing the Games Workshop ones. But anyway, that is me for wrapping it up today. I hope that you've enjoyed my tips and tricks. Oh, I almost forgot about my finishing product. I got to go over one last thing. Mod Podge. This is the gloss luster. We do use the matte finish and then the super luster. I don't have those available. They're probably over at the other table over there. Use that, mix it up with a little water. You can add paint to it to get some textures for like doing your basing and stuff, which I don't have any of my basics. We never went over that. We're going to go make a video about going over basing sometime too. But right now, it's just I want to show you the basics that I have at my desk all the time. I do have the gloss Mod Podge. That is basically getting a clear coat on your minis and making sure that your minis don't get damaged after you've painted them. The gloss is going to be very shiny. The super gloss is even more shiny. It looks a lot like glass. And the matte finish gives you a dull, like clear matte finish. So it doesn't really alter your mini too much. Anyway, we're going to tie this video up. And I thank you for taking 26 minutes out of your life today, or 27 minutes out of your life today to watch this video. And hopefully we can bring some more content. Watch for the shorts on some of the stuff that I've talked about and how we use them. You know, how we use this, how we use the sprue. We're going to do some shorts on that stuff. So anyway, until next time, my name is Scott. You can call me Guff. I'm signing off.